So it's my pleasure to introduce Ben from the Westmoreland Cultural Trust, and he's going to introduce our lunchtime speaker.
Hey everyone, I get the privilege of introducing one of my dear and long-term friends. So anyway, my name is Benjamin Luzak. I'm the CEO of the Westmoreland Cultural Trust. We have the Palace Theater, the Greensboro Garden, Civic Center, and 2 other historic buildings. And I was originally from Western Pennsylvania. I'm a graduate of Penn Trafford, moved away for 20 years, and I just moved back about 6 months ago. And I'm so thrilled to be stewarding these venues in the community that I grew up. Now, I was going to read Hayley Haldeman's bio, but you all have it in your packet, so I'm going to skip that. I just want to say I'm so proud of my friend Hayley. We graduated high school together and even did a show or 2 together, and it's just my privilege to introduce you as our panelist. She is the chair of the Pennsylvania Historical Museum and something commission.
Hi everyone, how are y'all doing? You're good. I have the misfortune of going immediately after lunch, so I don't think I will take up a full 30 minutes. I'm trying to be a little bit more brief and take you on a bit of a history refresher. So as Ben said, and again, Ben, wonderful to see you again. We had a bit of a 20-year gap, but nice to reconnect. My name is Hayley Haldeman, and thank you first and foremost so much to Go Laurel Highlands for hosting this event and inviting me here today. So round of applause for Don. So as Ben said, I am honored to serve as the chair of the Pennsylvania Historic and Museums Commission. PHMC, for those of you who aren't familiar, serves as the state's official history agency. So PHMC oversees our state archives, numerous historic sites, the State Historic Preservation Office, as well as the over 2,500 historic markers across the state. So whenever you're driving and you see the blue and yellow keystones, happy to report that's us, and we really love that program. PHMC is excited to be celebrating America's semi-quincentennial and the important role that Pennsylvania plays in our nation's history. So as I said, it's an honor to be here today. I'm delighted to come home. As Ben said, I grew up in Westmoreland County, also graduating from Penn Trafford High School. Go Warriors. And it was, thank you, Reggie. We'll do the alma mater at the end, if anyone's interested. And this regional connection, though, drove what I wanted to talk about today. So as we approach this anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, we know that this moment offers the time to reflect on the unique role that our communities played in the formation of the country, American ideals, and our shared identity. And so I wanted to talk about not just the importance of Pennsylvania in the history of our nation, but the incredible and distinct identity that this region in particular has, this area of the Laurel Highlands in southwestern Pennsylvania. So today will be a bit of a history refresher for some of you, maybe some new information for others, but I hope that it frames some of the conversations that I know are already starting and continuing today, as well as your planning in the months to come. So again, just to kind of set the stage, we'll go back 250 years. On the eve of the American Revolution, Pennsylvania was a multi-ethnic colony with about 250,000 inhabitants. English, German, Scotch-Irish, each constituting about a third of the population. And the religious tolerance of our founders, we all know, William Penn, had attracted settlers with a broad range of religious practices. Now, the highest concentration of these people lived in what city? Philadelphia, yep. So with nearly 30,000 residents, made it the largest city in North America at the time. And eastern Pennsylvania in general was home to a variety of ethnic groups with a wealthy elite and growing merchant class. And it really was the center of the American Enlightenment at the time. It was Philadelphia that was fostering intellectual debate, scientific inquiry, and political activism. Now, every grade school student knows that Pennsylvania looms large in the national narrative of the American Revolution. That's why we're here today. In eastern Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia in particular, I'm sorry to say, often steals a lot of that limelight in the Pennsylvania Revolutionary story. That is fair, though. I mean, to give Philly their due, for leaders of the American Revolution, it was Philadelphia that really was the headquarters of that effort. It was in 1774, the First Continental Congress gathered there. The year later, the Second Continental Congress convened in that city, ultimately leading to the decision to declare independence from the British rule. In 1776, as we all know, it was the Declaration of Independence adopted at the Pennsylvania State House, today known as Independence Hall. And then for several critical years, Philadelphia would serve as the headquarters of the Continental Army under George Washington. It was a center of activism, with newspapers and pamphlets printed and circulated, and rallies and protests organized. Ideas of liberty, democracy, republicanism, and revolution took root in Philadelphia, informed that national conversation during the Revolution, and would go on to shape the nation. So there's no denying that Philadelphia played a crucial role in this story, and that the city of Philadelphia served as a hub for political activism, military activity, and ideas of revolution. However, it's also true that during this time, it was Western Pennsylvania that played a significant, if often underappreciated role in the American Revolution, and I think laying the foundation for an identity that still resonates today. So as is still true in 2024 and now, those who lived in Western Pennsylvania often had a fundamentally different experience than their counterparts in Philadelphia and Southeast Pennsylvania. And I don't just mean our modern football alliances, that is important. Separated physically by the Appalachian Mountains, the experience of Western Pennsylvania at that time was informed by frontier life and the challenges of settling open land. In the lead up to the Revolutionary War, when Philadelphians were involved in resisting British taxation laws, those here in the southwestern part of the state were wrestling with threats from Native American attacks, as well as boundary issues with Virginia. And the boundary issue is one that's really fascinating and I think often forgotten, doesn't get a lot to do. But that Virginia-Pennsylvania boundary dispute picked up after the British Army garrison was removed from Fort Pitt in 1772. Pennsylvania had claimed the entire southwestern corner of the state, including Pittsburgh, but the vague Virginia Charter of 1609, woo, we're running this up, that charter led Virginians to believe that their westward expansion would include land as far north as the coveted forks of the Ohio River, so Pittsburgh. So from 1773 until about the start of the Revolutionary War, Virginia's governor actually laid claim to control southwestern Pennsylvania as a district of Virginia. So skirmishes actually during that time period were taking place between settlers loyal to Virginia as well as those who claimed to be true Pennsylvanians. So not surprisingly, many of those in the western part of the state felt that those out in Philadelphia and in the east failed to understand or appreciate their concerns and desires. They also believed that they were lacking adequate representation in their existing form of government, which was then known as the Pennsylvania Assembly. So all to say that for those living in rural Pennsylvania, far from the urban center, often in tension with Virginians or tribes, this experience fostered determination, adaptability, and a pragmatic approach to survival. Consequently, these people, our ancestors, the people here, were and are generally characterized by a spirit of independence, resilience, and self-reliance. So where does that lead? So prior to this period, Pennsylvania, because it was founded under Quaker auspices, differed from a lot of other American colonies in being devoid of formal military organization. However, in 1775, as tensions mounted, associators groups, patterned after these 18th century volunteer military companies designed to repel invasions, sprang up across the state. And on May 16, 1775, here's from Hammondstown. Nice, okay, you know where I'm going with this. So this was, again, more than a year before the Declaration of Independence was signed. Westmoreland County residents in Hammondstown proclaimed their intent to bind together against British tyranny. Now this event really is incredible. I know we've already heard a little bit about it today, but it spoke to the character of southwestern Pennsylvanians at this time. Before most other colonial communities were even organizing, the Hammondstown Resolves marked the explicit codification of willingness to take up arms against Great Britain and support the besieged residents of Boston. Now think about that. This was prior to the Declaration of Independence. It was a scrappy group of frontier rebels that issued one of the most direct challenges to what was then the strongest nation in the entire world. Now, if that's not Southwestern PA energy, I don't know what it is. So isolated though they were, those individuals knew even then that a monarchy without checks and balances and taxation without representation was un-American, at a time when America itself was barely even a concept. Shortly after the resolves, the Provincial Assembly gave official recognition to the various associators, grouping their companies into battalions that would become organized and funded by the state. And ultimately, thousands of Pennsylvanians answered the call to arms and served in those battalions. During the American Revolution, military leaders from Western Pennsylvania, such as tactician Daniel Morgan and General John Neville, played critical roles in organizing local defenses and in supporting the Continental Army. Other local leaders, such as George Rogers Clark, I know these are names that some of us all know, were influential in rallying support for the revolutionary cause. Now, throughout the war, the Laurel Highlands area sent battalions of patriotic men east to fight in Washington's Continental Army. This involved sacrifice not only for those who served, but also for those who were left on the home front. In many instances, homes and communities were left underdefended, giving opportunities to the British and others to attack frontier homesteads and towns. The resilient Pennsylvanians who remained protected their families and communities through small volunteer military forces, community communication systems, and group shelters and fortifications. I have to say, I was really thinking about that fact when I drove out here. Just the idea as a woman of being left, if I were left, I get upset when my husband isn't home in time for bedtime and bath time. I love the idea of being left and what this meant for those small communities left to fend for themselves. It should also be noted that Western Pennsylvania, too, contributed more than just troops to the revolutionary cause. So farmers in Western Pennsylvania provided essential food supplies to the Continental Army. The region's agricultural output supported both local troops in the broader war effort, again, the same sort of resources that we see today. And the region was also rich in timber and iron, crucial resources for manufacturing weapons and other goods. Our waterways also provided a vital link for moving supplies between the frontier and the eastern colonies. So then, as now, this is a region committed to democracy. And one of the values of history is being able to look back to the past to understand where we find ourselves today. The story of the revolution as it was experienced in Western Pennsylvania is about so much more than 1776. In this moment, as I know we're already all thinking about, we're invited to consider ideas of the American experience in this experiment of democracy. So as we prepare for the semi-quincentennial celebration, I encourage you to go beyond marking the events of the past and instead be connecting it to the people and projects of today. PHMC is excited to help and serve with whatever we can do for local communities who are looking for ways to further engage citizens and communities in those conversations. Because in many ways, Western Pennsylvania's experiences during those pre-revolutionary and revolutionary years continue to resonate now. The words that we use to describe those Western Pennsylvanians, some of the things that I was saying earlier, self-reliant, independent-minded, strong, and adaptable. These all describe the hallmarks of today's Western Pennsylvanians and coincide with what we think of as quintessential American characteristics. These were people who were willing to fight, remarkable not just for what they believed in, but who they did it with, taking up arms with the same people they were having border disputes with just a few months earlier. So the region's revolutionary story captures what we often think of as the best of America. Devotion to community, diverse people united in common cause, and a willingness to come together and sacrifice for the common good. The 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence is a milestone that invites us to reflect on the past and our shared heritage. I am so proud to be from southwestern Pennsylvania and first and foremost an American. Thank you all.
Anyone have any questions or comments for Hayley? Yes, Dan.
Can you share what your commission with this? Do you decide all of the museums with this common club?
Yeah, great question. Thank you very much. So Pennsylvania Historical Museums Commission, PHMC, does a couple things. As I mentioned, we oversee the state archives. We also run the State Museum located in Harrisburg. Has anyone been to the State Museum? Oh, awesome. Okay, great. I should have known this was like kind of a favorable audience for it. We also oversee the State Historic Preservation Office, and then we do directly oversee 23 historic sites across the Commonwealth. So places like Fort Pitt, Fort Niagara up in Erie, Ephrata out towards the middle of the state, the Lumber Museum. Has anyone been to the Lumber Museum? Awesome. The Lumber Museum is awesome. If anyone is looking for a cool place to go, the Lumber Museum is incredible. I never thought a museum dedicated to wood would be as interesting as it is, but it's just, it's really, really interesting. It's a great place to go. It's a beautiful area of the state, so I would highly recommend the Lumber Museum. In addition to directly overseeing those 23 sites, which PHMC often does in conjunction with nonprofit friends groups, we also provide grant support as well as other resources to a number of other historic sites across the state.
I think so.
Well, yeah.
Yes. In addition to all that, I know Pennsylvania Historical Museum commissioned markers that are all throughout the state of historically significant and processed and based them to get a marker.
Yeah.
I feel like we don't do enough to call attention to whatever those sites are beyond just putting what they there.
I'm really glad you brought that up. The marker program for me is the piece that I get really excited about in terms of PHMC's portfolio. I think I mentioned there's over 2,500 different markers across the state, and that's been a program that's been in existence for over 50 years. And these markers are really important because they preserve not just the good things about American history and Pennsylvania history, but also some of the things that we still need to remember, even if it's not always convenient or something that we would like to. So everything from people, places, events, moments, and it's a process that's really driven by Pennsylvania citizens. I mean, in a few instances, it will be PHMC identifying a site, but in most instances, those nominations come from citizens. So as you all are thinking about ways to engage your community or ways for your own organization to have a bigger role in the semi-quincentennial, I'd really direct you to look at the Historic Marker Program. The program was on pause for the last year because of COVID-related supply issues, but we are relaunching it actually later this month. It's November already. So later this month, so that'll be going live. And again, encouraging whether it's school groups, volunteer groups, nonprofits in the area, to identify places of historical significance in your local community can be a really, really fun and meaningful way, and also provides a tangible link that will continue beyond 2026, which I think is what those markers are why they're so valuable. I will also say that it is my Toyota that has the I brake for historical marker bumper sticker outside. So if you're ever in, I should have brought a couple of them. If you're ever in Harrisburg, please stop by the State Archives. We'd be happy to give you a couple of them. Yeah, sorry, follow.
My first deep dive into that was when I was a Main Street manager of Blairsville.
Oh, fantastic! Great, thank you.
A site rescue marker in the edge of town that, again, locals found the story about the marker, and now they've got an organization built around that event and the history of that. And I just wonder, is there an interactive map of where all these are that you can go in and explore electronically, virtually, that there's the marker, it's the story of what came?
Yeah. Great question. I swear we didn't arrange this in advance. You're providing inquiries that I think are really helpful. So the PHMC website does have a version of that. You can go to the state, you can look at your particular zip code, and you can zoom in on an area, and it will show you all of the historic markers that are located there. As one of PHMC's 250 priorities, we are looking to further develop that website and the electronic technology associated with markers. We're hopeful that it won't be too long, for example, that there might be some sort of way to, I'm not a tech person, but like almost geotagging them, so you could do some overlay that if you're putting, like I'm driving out to Fayette later today, and here's the historical markers that I'll pass along route. We're not there yet, but that's the type of thing that we want to make sure the marker program, which has been a popular program for so many decades, is still adaptive and up to date with continued technology. But yeah, definitely check out the website. It can be really cool to kind of scroll through. And oftentimes, I mean, I've done it a number of times with both where I live in Pittsburgh and now out where my parents live in Westmoreland County. And I'm often finding markers that I had never seen before. So thank you. Some questions? Yeah.
I think, was it recently there was either a national or a state level sort of an inventory of historic sites again, kind of going back to the 70s when there was a big push for preservation. Is that happening at the state level, and are there other grants or things available to help with restoration of historic sites that might then become a future destination for heritage tourism?
Yeah, very good question. PHMC does provide grants for both ongoing projects as well as grants that go help to renovation or rehab, things that could, for example, support capital projects. Now we look for things that tend to be a little bit more than ongoing maintenance and more something that would draw new programs. There are a variety of different grant programs available though, so I'd encourage to check the website to get a little bit more of that background, and I'm also happy to connect you with PHMC staff. I think there was another part of your question.
Just the survey piece.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, 'cause like, there was a historic American building survey, and that's been some time ago, and I'm worried that there are other buildings that either got overlooked or that are now, again, in need of preservation.
Yeah, our State Historic Preservation Office is actually in the process of putting together a new preservation plan, and part of that has been an audit and a recognition of making sure we're identifying currently historical significant properties, but identifying resources and methodologies for local communities to do that work. I mean, PHMC has never taken the perspective that it should be the state agency that you know is itself owning and maintaining all of those properties, but we want to make sure that for local communities, nonprofit groups, volunteers, whomever, we're directing them and serving as a good partner.
This one.
Good.
There's one thing we need to add to your comments when we give out what products we give or sending to these. You left out the fact that we made some very good whiskey.
Yeah, I can almost tell where that was going. That's like, yeah, that's the key. That's the key in terms of what was really driving the troops.
And right after the taxes, they all went to Tennessee and Kentucky, and they all claimed to be Kentucky, but it's again not right.
Good point. Good. So most important import or export, I'm sorry, Western Pennsylvania, we know. Thank you, that's a great edit. Yes, sorry, one.
Can I go on to that? Before the whiskey was the grains and the monetary value. So that's the agricultural history of our region and state. Where they were, but they have more emphasis on that agriculture and how important it was in making the rye and barley from out of this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say quickly, when I was preparing for this, even just looking at this period in this region as a microcosm, I mean, I was really limiting myself to like 1772 to about 1777. It's such a rich analogy for everything that southwestern Pennsylvania represents. I mean, just the spirit of the people, as I talked about, what's the characteristic and what's the spirit. But in terms of the agriculture, and in terms of the people, and in terms of what frontier life was, and in terms of what would shape the country, the region, and the state for the next 50 years, you really can see the roots of it already in just that 5-year period. So it's for me, it was a really fascinating moment in Pennsylvania's history to dive back into in that period just immediately before the war. Well, thank you all so much again. I'm happy to chat.
We can actually thank Philly for bringing Hayley and I together because we met in Philly and then realized we were both from Western PA. So I'm going to actually take a cue from you on the football analogy, and I'm going to call an audible for the way we do our afternoon session. So I had originally planned to take us back to the amphitheater, but I really like this setup. So we had the next half hour set aside for brainstorming. But here's my thought, and I'd like to hear what you guys think. I like this table setup, and I like how everybody's kind of mixed among different organizations and different people. And I'm wondering if we could just take maybe 10 minutes to come up with a brainstorming idea for 250, just with the people who are sitting at your table. And if you're at a small table, join a big table. And then let's share our ideas with each other, okay? And then that way we might be able to leave a little earlier. And I will tell you that our afternoon session will have 2 people who are going to talk about whiskey. Stay tuned for whiskey talk.
Samples as well?
So